Hello, how are you, Gloria?
Good. How are you? Happy New Year.
Good. My apologies for starting a little late. We were having some technical difficulties, but we got those all
Yeah.
figured out. Yeah. All right. Well, people got to read your amazing bio. And if you all have not had a chance to check it out, I encourage you to go to the promotional material or my blog for Gloria's well deserved and I'm sure hard work to get all those credentials. But I just want to thank you so much for your time and just wanted to give a little bit of my thoughts on why I wanted to do this right now.
Yeah.
Um, we know that exercise, it has been shown to mitigate a lot of issues like depression and anxiety. It's also such a great way to keep the body healthy, to get out to nature, to socialize. But 2020 has taken a mental health toll on everybody. And as if life wasn't hard enough, we all have pressures and stressors like family and finances and health, career, academics, social life, and on and on. But as athletes, we also have the pressures to excel in sport. So now we add all of those
hmm
stressors on top of the uncertainty of the near future and so much being out of our control. I'm not embarrassed to say that this
Yeah.
has been an incredibly difficult time for myself. I've been very
Right.
overwhelmed and stressed as
Right.
well. So I just thank you so much
Yeah.
for carving a little time out of your day to speak with me. You're such a dear friend to me, but you're also such a passionate human being who also happens to be a rock star
Thank you.
sports psychologist. So I'm just grateful for your time and to have this discussion with you. And there's kind of two reasons why I wanted to have this discussion. Well, three. One, I get to chat with you after this and we get to catch up. But the first one is that to help athletes and fitness enthusiasts thrive during this time of lack of structure and changing routine and canceled races, and this reduced group training and socializing. We're living in such a triggering environment right now where it can be really easy to resort to unhealthy coping strategies because we feel out of control and trying to manage stress and
hmm
anxiety and depression. And then, secondly, I've been giving this a lot of thought that I find that there's a lot of discrepancy between sports psychology and mental health, although they're both very interrelated. When I think about sports
Yeah.
psychology or people think about sports psychology, we often think about I want to learn new skills so that I can perform at a higher
Yeah.
level, like mental
Right.
skills training. And you have helped me with that. And this component of psychology is often celebrated and encouraged and sought after. And it's like the athlete who has a sports psychologist is someone who's really dedicated to sport and wants to be mentally tough. And athletes want to find these strategies. How can I take my performance to the next level? But then there's this part of psychology that comes with this societal sensitivity and stigma with athletes that are struggling with anxiety and depression and addiction and eating disorders, obsession, and psychological aspects of injury and retiring from sport. And the athletes that work with a sports psychologist when it comes to maximizing performance, there's no shame in that, right? That's almost like a feeling of
Right. Right.
pride. But then on the other side, when you have a mental health issue, you have this fear of coming across as weak or sensitive or needy or vulnerable. And none of those are true. And so when we think about this misbelief that athletes can only succeed if they're mentally tough and
Right.
emotionally stable, this sends the message that we can't have mental health problems, that something's wrong with us if we have mental health problems. And we know that's not true because a rising number of professionals have come
Right.
out and talked openly about their mental health struggle. So, you know, for athletes, it's not just important that we think about mental health for our quality of life and well being, but it's also a way that we can also improve our performance as well.
Yes, yes, absolutely. I appreciate, we did a talk, I think, was it April of 2020?
Yep.
Around that time. And I appreciate that you're still continuing the conversation and revisiting this conversation and reminding athletes in the community that we need to continue to address this and continue the conversation. So I appreciate what you're doing and what Trimarni is doing and using the platform to continue to address it, to break down that stigma, right? I think this is how we do it and understand and that sports psychology isn't without our own personal psychology, our own mental health. Like, I often feel like in some ways it's deceptive when people come to me and they're like, you're the sports psychologist. I'm like, but I'm also a clinical psychologist. So I'm not seeing the things separate, right?
Yeah.
Which, but I think the dichotomy, like these, I don't know. Yeah, I guess it's in some way a dichotomy, but is athletics culture, right? It's very all or nothing, black or white. Sports psychologist is good, seeing a mental health provider is bad, right? And I think um again, it's like the thinking around it, the thinking around this culture, or that it has to be so black and white. And I think it makes sense. Our brains, it's a thinking trap to create certainty, right? If we can label it black and white, then we're certain that it is or it isn't, and then we can move on. And but I absolutely, you hit the nail on the head that it, you know definitely for me, I've had to revisit my mental health several times over the course since March. And then recently with what happened in Washington, D.C. at the Capitol, right? So you mentioned constant retriggering, whether it's social media, whether it's turning on the TV or the radio, or even conversations. You may be at the supermarket and hear people talk about it, right?
Hmm.
Our side conversation. So we're not immune to those triggers. And being an athlete, I think, is just one part of our identity as being a human being. And I
Yep.
think revisiting the human being part of us, because we can all relate.
Yeah.
Definitely I've gone through my ups and downs in the last several months. And you're right, these unhealthy coping strategies, I think, for a good at least for a good many people that I've talked to, you use them and then you realize, okay, if this pandemic lasts another year, I can't go on like this. I can't
Yeah.
just sit on the sofa and Netflix binge, So I think the good thing about athletes is there's this inner resilience and like this need to move and to find a new goal.
Yeah.
After you've all the college athletes are like, yeah, I really like the rest. And that lasted for a few months. And then it's like this need to really reestablish a goal or reestablish the direction. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Great. So to get started, I'd like to hear from you. What is mental health and psychological well-being, and why are they important? What does caring for our mental health look like?
All right. So, mental health is a huge piece, but I like to think of it as a pie. And certainly I think if anybody's watching, share how you care for your mental health, share ideas. I think that's what we're here to do. So if anything triggers you or you have any questions about that, feel free to, I guess, to field them to you. But I like to think of, our mental health is just one component, one piece of the pie of our wholeness and health. Right. So I think of our spiritual health, our emotional, mental health, our physical health, our relationship health, our, I guess, job, career, our purpose, what we do in this world, kind of health, and that sometimes is different than our job description. And so, I think the mental health piece in my philosophy is very much attuning to the mind body connection. And that's what makes athletes a unique population, is because you already have that body piece there in a specific way. And so our mental health is really, the mindset, our thoughts, our feelings, our decisions, right? A lot of the stuff that comes out of our brain. But even that we know is electrochemical, the neurotransmitters, the biological process that happens with it. So mental health is physical health, when it comes down to a scientific piece. I think it's just hard to quantify, where does a thought come from, right? Um, and then in the short, caring for our mental health means we have tools, we have mechanisms, we have instruments, things that we can implement in our daily life that help us address these areas of our mental health. So we have thoughts, feelings, physiological stuff that surfaces in regards to a mental health trigger or something that triggers us. So do we have a tool to address our thoughts when they start to race or start to get dysfunctional or unhealthy? Do we have a tool to address our feelings? Right? Maybe we can't, our thoughts are just like not there, but we really feel restless or sad. Or maybe we can't identify either one of those, but our body is just feeling it. Our heart's racing, our stomach feels in knots, and we don't know why. Right? So do we have tools to address each one of those? And so part of that is expanding the toolbox, which we talk about all the time, right?
Mhm.
And trying out different tools. And just like an athlete wouldn't just do one workout or work with one coach for 1 year and say, oh, that doesn't work. Like these tools, you have to constantly practice them to figure out what works and in what situations. And that's why it becomes a longer process to develop these coping skills. Um, yeah. So, one example might be like our caring for our mental health. Some of the rituals that I've established is making sure I meditate once a day. And typically that's either in the morning or in the evening. So when my son is taking a bath or in the morning when he's off to school. And then doing some stretching, some yoga, some breathing with movement. I really like vinyasa yoga. Definitely some gratitude journaling. And so that might be 3 things I'm really grateful for, or just waking up first thing in the morning saying, thank you for a warm bed. Thank you that I woke up healthy and my mind is clear. And thank you that my son is feeling healthy today. Right. It just a small gratitude practice. And then also it could be, yeah, again, like journaling or some deep breathing, a lot of different tools, but having something practice and implement a plan.
Yeah. Oh, those are really good. I think the biggest takeaway that I heard from you
I can't.
is just
Okay,
that,
there you go. Yeah.
can you hear me? We good?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think the biggest
Yeah.
takeaway that I heard from you is that, we need a variety of coping skills. We need lots of tools in the toolbox because
Yeah.
each situation that we experience is different. So what we just witnessed in Washington,
Mm-hmm.
D.C. is very different than a race being canceled. And
Yeah.
we may be able to use the
Right.
similar tools, but
Right.
we also may need to use different ones. And then this idea of how your mental health affects your physical health. I mean, I see this on my end as a sports dietitian is that we have such a close
Yeah.
connection with the brain and the gut. And so, I mean, think about it if you're an
Yes.
athlete,
Yeah.
if you're nervous before a race, your gut shuts down, right? It doesn't want you to
Yeah.
eat because that's even more stress to your system. You can't put any food in your
Mm-hmm.
body if you're
Mm-hmm.
super nervous. Or if you are able to eat, you get
Yeah.
nauseous or you even throw up before an event. This doesn't mean that you have an allergy or an intolerance to a certain food. This is just your brain
Right.
communicating with your gut. And so on one end, we can
Mm-hmm.
think about, okay, we want to make sure we eat a, a nutritious diet, which is very personalized to every individual, so we can help the good and bad gut bacteria. But you also can't just eat your way out of feeling depressed and anxious as well. So
Right.
nutrition is important, but
Right.
we really want to pay attention to those thoughts and feelings and how they're impacting us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's that piece of the pie, right? Nutrition. Well, the physical health, yeah, and the nutrition is huge, right? So we have a lot of different components, part of this whole health piece. Yeah.
Yeah. And another question is, as it relates to mental health, what are some of the positives of being an athlete? Why should we want to make time in our day to exercise and train? Why don't we want to give up sport? Because I think we've all, as athletes, probably had a time where it's like, why am I still even doing this? The races are canceled, events are canceled, my
Yeah.
sport is not happening. But then on the other side, it's like, okay, but how do I train? And I think that we just have all these really confusing thoughts right now. We need to remember why we do what we
Mm-hmm.
do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, you said that, you hit the nail on the head. Remembering why it's important to our lives. It's certainly okay to take a break. It's certainly okay to question whether this is the sport or the thing you want to continue to do. Um, but also differentiating that from taking a break and needing to step back from sport versus like retiring and letting it go altogether, right? Because I think people that are active So, you have people that have an athletic history that are used to moving their bodies, and their bodies are used to processing the energy in that way, right? And so when they stop suddenly, that can be very difficult, because it's like, how do you work out that tension? How do you work out all that restless energy? It's natural. I'm one of those people. And then you have folks that have just started getting into sport. They weren't lifelong athletes, and so when they take a break, sometimes it's a little temptation to like let things go, right? And so um, I think, one, recognizing, so building self-awareness to like, which type of person are you? And then there's probably a range of people in between there. And then also like recognizing that sport, it's something that really allows us to channel all these positive qualities. So I really believe that sport reveals character, sport reveals patterns. And I think it can also provide opportunities to build new ones. So it's a really good classroom to, one, manifesting your strengths, the grit, the resilience, the determination, the ambition, the sense of community and connection. Someone may be a really big introvert in their daily life, and they get to a race and they're just high fiving everybody, right? I think it's so cool to see that certain environments, especially an athletic environment, especially triathlon, where you can go to a race and Kansas and then see your friends from California or Florida and like, hey, how'd you do that race? The community, the connection is so powerful that I think it allows us to kind of bring out these parts of ourselves that maybe in our daily life we can't.
Yeah.
I mean, I think about accountants, nothing about accountants, but you're probably crunching numbers, very, individual. And then you go out and be a triathlete, and you're in your training group and races, and a different side of you comes out that I think that's what we don't want to let that go. So it might not be the same sport anymore. I remember before getting back to Hawaii 70.3 in 2016, I did a lot of trail running. I did a 50 miler, and I was doing long 50K races and really getting into that. And I needed that break from triathlon. Right. And
Mhm.
then I got back to it in Hawaii, and then I got pregnant, and then, had my first Olympic race after I had my son. And that was fun. And it just had a different sense of purpose behind it. So, I stopped, I stood back from sport, but I also needed to find other ways to let these qualities come out. Right.
Yeah.
Along with all the other physical health benefits. So, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I really like how you answered that. I I think that we as athletes, for the athlete community, we have to remember that sport serves us well in so many ways, but we also have to make sure that our
Hmm.
intentions and our feelings and our thoughts are also serving us well. For a lot of us, we got
Yeah.
into the sport, whatever it is, because we loved it, the sport itself. We loved how it made us feel and being around teammates and like
Hmm.
to feeling challenged. But sometimes, our intentions can get a bit more unhealthy or extreme
Yeah.
as it relates to diet or body composition or
Hmm.
training. And all of that is going to compromise well being. I also think it's important to address how you feel
Yeah.
about your body during this time, because we don't want exercise and movement, which is so good for you, to become a way of punishment or compensation.
Right.
Really appreciating what your body can do, and to not take your abilities and
Hmm.
freedom for granted. And then we should exercise or train because we
Hmm.
enjoy what
Hmm.
we're doing while we're doing it, not so that we want
Yeah.
to look a certain way, or we fear gaining weight, or like I said, to punish for
Hmm.
calories consumed. Exercise should have a
Yeah.
positive impact on physical and psychological well-being. If not, it leads to negative
Yeah.
consequences, not only with physical health but mental health. So I think it's really important for athletes right now to just address kind of where the thoughts are with exercise and how it's serving you, because for some it might be good to take a break. For others, it may be readjusting expectations and goals. And for other people, it could be that they
Hmm.
need to
Hmm.
get back out there and they need to be doing something for themselves.
Yeah. I mean, I think you said the key word is intention. We can look at someone's behavior, and they could be doing the exact same thing, but two different intentions and why someone does something. Right. And I think that's the powerful key to like, and the simple question is this fun for me? Is this fun? And if you
Mhm.
say, if it's no, I mean, no bike test for 20 minutes,
Right.
is going to be fun,
Yeah.
but it serves a purpose in the overall, like the sport is fun and the goal, right? I mean, so I don't want people to miss the point, but like you said, if most of what you're feeling is this compulsion and this anxiety driven by this fear of how you're going to look or gaining calories or weight, if that underlying emotion tends to be training out of fear or doing things because you're scared, then that's a big tell, right? The
Yeah.
intention, it's telling, really telling about the intention. And then that does go into another area of really examining that piece. Because if you don't and you decide to do another sport, it's going to come out there. Right. So that's why I said
Mhm.
that those underlying patterns will most always be there. And I think of things as a spectrum. So myself, I'm very much a go-getter. I like to get things done. When someone tells me what they need, I'm on it for the most part. But that also could lead to impatience, right? So every character quality we have is on it, can be on a spectrum. It can be used to really advance us, and then it could be used to kind of work against us, right?
Yeah.
So that impatience can lead to being frustrated or rushing things or missing details, right? So it really is about checking your intention and not being so hard on yourself, like, oh, I'm doing something bad. It's like, this isn't healthy. What do I need to go in a healthy direction with sport? Who do I
Yeah.
need to talk to help me with that? Because if you can't tell anybody, then that's a big tell too, right? If you're
Mhm.
keeping this secret, like, fear of that, or every time somebody wants to go to the coffee shop and they want to get some sweets and you're like, no, I gotta go, you know and you can't tell them why because you don't feel like you've earned your muffin, then that's a tell, right? If we can't
Mhm.
keep, if we don't feel comfortable telling. And that's the hardest thing, I think, in the clinical piece with working with legit diagnosed eating disorders, is that it's very hard for people to want to change that and let that go. So there's a bigger issue,
Yeah.
right? It's not just sport triggering. Sport can trigger, but those patterns are probably there for a long time. As we can see in the
Yeah.
eating disorder research, a lot of the times it goes back to early childhood or adolescence, or these key points going into college, developmental milestones that happens with hormones and body, but also environmental factors that influence. But
Yeah.
I have seen athletes that their freshman year they come in with a whole lot of different unhealthy messages from coaches and support staff about their body image and weight, and I'm just appalled. I'm appalled that you're still telling an 18, 17-year-old, 16-year-old young people that they need to look a certain way to perform in their sport. And I know we
Yeah.
feel the same way on this, but
Yeah.
yeah, it kind of starts leading in that direction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, and we'll talk about that. But I really liked what, before we go on to the next question, which goes well, why athletes are vulnerable to mental health issues,
Mm-hmm.
your idea of having different intentions. And I
Yeah.
think I can think of an example in that one athlete goes out to run and doesn't have a specific time or pace goal, but just goes to run, to listen to a podcast, to go out to nature, because they need to get out because they know that they'll feel better afterwards, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, because I love how this makes
Yeah.
me feel. Good intentions. The other athlete
Yeah.
has intentions that because they ate too much last night or ate the wrong foods, or I'm feeling fat. Now I need to run 2 hours so I can burn this many calories and then I will feel better about myself. Two completely different intentions,
Yeah.
still going out for a run and making sure. So now we need to make sure that our intentions are correct, serving us
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So why are
Mm-hmm.
athletes
Mm-hmm.
vulnerable to mental health issues? And before you answer this, I I think that we often forget that athletes are also human beings, and we kind of put athletes, and sport culture does this. We put athletes on a really high at a really high standard. And we love, I mean, I love watching athletes race in any sport or compete. It's great, but it comes with a
Mm-hmm.
lot of pressure, but they are human beings. And so mental health,
Yeah.
if you think about the definition, it's not just the presence or absence of a mental disorder. but it's a state of well-being, that you're aware of your abilities and you can cope with life's normal stressors. So for athletes, there's not just these physical challenges that we have to deal with, but there's also the personal challenges that we deal with outside of sport. And and some athletes have more challenges
Yeah.
than others, so we have to keep in mind that these are we are human beings. We're not just athletes. We can't just focus on the athlete
Yeah.
self. We have to focus on the whole self.
Absolutely. And I think, you mentioned everybody having different lifestyle factors that, so, I think we're not talking about elite professional, right? We're talking about the age group competitor. Maybe they're competing at a high level, but it's not their job, right? So we're talking about, you know, for example, I have my son, right? So my life and how much I could train before my son and how much I was willing to dedicate myself to looks different now, right? So now that he's 3, um, he's changed. And so our time management has changed, right? And so being susceptible to different stressors and different impacts, even as that changes, right? And so I think that's where, really doing a regular check-in. So I did this podcast. Again, I'm making them sure about New Year's resolutions. And my whole point was having a regular system of checking in on your intentions, checking in on your values, checking in on what's going on in your life. So, because nothing is at a perfect balance. Well-being isn't a point you get to and you just write it out, right? It's like a teeter-totter. You're constantly shifting things around. And some days are better than others where you feel like, okay, well-being, like all the cards are set. I feel good about these things in my area. But it takes evaluating that, especially even during the last 10 months, because it's changed a lot for us. So I think what makes us vulnerable is one, when we're not self-aware. So that's why I really preach and teach mindfulness skills to build that self-awareness to our emotional patterns, the decisions we make, our reactive or responsive patterns, and how that plays out in our body, right? If an athlete tells me, that they didn't have a good training session, I'll be like, well, help me know what that means. And if they're like, my mind was there, I was feeling good, but my body just wasn't firing. Okay, like that tells me something and gives me some information about what questions we need to ask. Like, why was that? Were you up late with your kid? Where, if it's a college student, were you studying? Where were you just restless and couldn't get to sleep because your thoughts were racing? Right. So the sleep
Mhm.
impacted your performance, but the thoughts racing during the time you're trying to go to sleep impacted you. So your training session was great, your thoughts were clear, but they're impacting you when you're trying to rest, right? So I think self-awareness to those patterns is very key. And then I think in general, again, sport, your time away from your family, the time it takes to train, the dedication, the amount of investment, that can trigger some people, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people lost jobs, income. um, you know, I think triathlon in general is a very privileged sport, for the most part, higher socioeconomic status for folks that race. And so it's different than going to a running race. So, with all that said, I think we have these specific biological, our own vulnerabilities from our history, family history, depression, anxiety. Certain things can be hereditary. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it means when stressors happen, we're more vulnerable, right? It's just like
Mhm.
someone could be fine, but if they have a suppressed immune system from not getting all the nutrients. The moment someone comes around them and gets sick, they may be more vulnerable than the next person that's has that good nutrients, right? Think of mental health the same way, right? We all have these vulnerabilities, and that's why we need to manage stress and manage the big life changes, because those are the things that could trigger the deeper mental health problems later down the road. Hopefully that
Yeah,
answered your question.
yeah, yeah. It's just kind of like that. Many of us may have underlying things that are with us that we may not always
Mhm.
recognize, and then it may bring us to
Yeah.
sport, or we may find sport, and then because of sport, it comes out. And that doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It just means
Yeah.
that we need to make sure that we address it.
Yeah.
Um, I'm reminded of
And real quick,
there's
so I mean, yeah,
no,
go
go
ahead.
on.
No, I wanted to say, if we think of like, um, you know, if we think of diabetes, like someone, is a little more sensitive to insulin, and maybe that's like genetic or hereditary, right? Maybe it's something you're born with. So you have to be more mindful of your choices. And I think thinking about that's why self-awareness is really key. When I make a choice,
Mhm.
I need to be mindful of the areas in my life that, are going to be impacted by this, right? And if we're not
Yeah,
mindful and we're on autopilot and we keep going through the same routines, we're going to make the same choices. They're going to lead us down the same path. And injury is a manifestation of that. The same type of injury is an example of that. So yeah. And good.
yeah, yeah, yeah. There's been a lot of studies that have shown or compared the psychological profiles of athletes and then compared them with individuals that
Mhm.
have eating disorders like anorexia, and they share very similar traits. Things like high self expectations, perfectionism, obsessiveness, competitiveness, hyperactivity, repetitive exercise routines. It was like, I work out twice a day. I work out, sometimes 7 days a week. We all can admit
Yeah.
to these things, right?
Yeah.
Compulsiveness, a distorted body image, preoccupation with weight and dieting, a tendency towards depression. So this just confirms that for us as athletes, there are side effects of our great qualities. So our qualities that help us
Yes.
excel and stay disciplined and motivated and have these great performances and enjoy our sport can also hurt us if we don't have the necessary coping skills or address
Right.
things when they start to impact our well-being.
Yeah, and I think this, it goes back again to the sports and athletic culture, because you have to have a certain amount of, like, I think, vulnerability to be able to ask for help and say, "Hey, I realize, like, I'm really starting to work against myself." And that's, again, I think you see that with people that get into triathlon at first and are super excited. They're gung ho, like they want to do everything. And I remember kind of being like that, but I also know myself and know that I'm not typically. I guess I'm an A minus, maybe B plus attitude. I'm not a strong type A. Um, and so I know that certain patterns won't be triggered in me. And but I also know, like, so I think that's where we just got to be mindful and recognize, like, in our culture, to keep having these conversations. So if something does go awry, you're not feeling shame, you're not feeling like you're bad or that your personality or something's wrong with you. We need to find a healthy balance and how to bring those back to a space where it can be productive in your life, versus, debilitating. And so I think that's a big cue that you mentioned, is like, if it's negatively impacting our life and our social life, our work life, relationships, financial, or other areas, then it's a cue to, like, ask for help, talk to somebody. Yeah. And again, I think when we're talking about eating disorders and that group there, and people that struggle with that, I think there's specific treatment protocols and evaluations. So, if you take a screening instrument, see it as a screening instrument and not like a scarlet letter or something's wrong with you. That just says, ask a professional, get some help. Because I would never want someone to sit with this label and think, oh my gosh, like, this is what I have or what I do. So yeah, I think recognizing if your personality traits are starting to go in an unhealthy direction, and then asking someone for help, and hopefully a
Yeah.
professional like yourself that's
Yeah.
certified, that has the expertise, not someone on Instagram, not an influencer. Even, I saw this Instagram post, like, be a certified nutrition coach in 6 months. I was like, what the heck?
Yeah.
No. And I wouldn't want someone to be fooled to see that I'm a nutrition coach and they look great. So you're just going to DM them a quick question. And because they're not certified or don't have a license, they're going to give you some advice right back, and because they probably want your business. Not to be
Yeah.
skeptical, but I worry about that, because yeah, during the pandemic, more and more people, mental health services went up, for sure. Reported mental health concerns went up, especially with student athletes, by 150 to 250%.
Mhm.
So those that were saying they were having mental health concerns before, the NCAA students reported 150 to 250% increase in mental health symptoms and issues during the pandemic, right? And if those people are, where are they getting their information? Where are they getting support? Where are they getting help from? Hopefully from
Yeah.
credible and legit sources. Okay.
Yeah. 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 Nutrition consulting, it's so much more than food. It's it requires a lot
So
more
much more.
extensive
Yeah.
understanding of
Yes.
the body
Mm-hmm.
and outside factors as well. So just to finish
Yeah,
off
for sure.
our conversation today, I would like to spend a little time on a few bullet points of areas that I feel have can either cause mental health issues or may result from underlying mental health issues. So either way, however you want to term it, however you want to think about it, we want to have
Mm-hmm.
practical tips and coping methods for these topics. So the first one, we'll just spend a little time on each one. The first one is injury. What athlete hasn't been injured, right? Whether it's a
Yeah.
small niggle or a serious
Right. Right.
injury,
Yep.
whether it's from overtraining or pushing injury happens, it definitely affects us because it removes something that we love to do. It keeps us from training or
Mm-hmm.
exercising. So I would like to hear your thoughts on athletes that are injured or get when they get injured.
So when athletes are injured, my approach is one with compassion. It sucks to be in that position, right? And so if we can learn to see ourselves with a bit of compassion and kindness, that's going to help the body heal. And so, for me as the psychologist, my like injury tells me that an athlete has been not been successful in listening to the cues of their body, right?
Mhm,
And it's different than it would be for a 17-year-old, 18-year-old, and it's different than if I meet with a 40-year-old. 17 to
mhm,
18-year-old developmentally is a different place to start learning about their body and start learning to make choices on their own, especially in collegiate sport. 40-year-old, it's going to look different. Is what's going on, what's impacting the decisions and not listening to your body. Because I think, I've always believed the body can heal itself. It's phenomenal. And it tells us everything. If we can't think cognitively, think of the answer, our body will tell us the answer. When you get near someone and your gut drops and you just don't feel the right vibe, your body's telling you don't feel comfortable for some reason, right? So I think injury tells me, like, how do we listen to your body better? Because I know you don't want to have this injury happen again. What cues
mhm,
have we missed? And
mhm,
that's likely being impacted by culture, coaches, training load, multiple stressors in our lives, right? So
mhm.
injury is, we got to, it's looking at, backtracking the map. How did we get to this point? Right? So when did you start to feel like something was off? Was it or was it a freak accident, right? You're pole vaulting and it was wet or something wasn't wiped off and you slipped.
Yeah,
That's a freak, freak accidents happen. Like
but you
shit.
may
Like
learn that
even
you
that.
shouldn't do it in the rain
Yeah.
or whatever.
Exactly. So there's always something to learn from it. And so I think athletes saying I'm injured is almost like shaming. You feel bad, like you did something wrong, but there's always something to learn. And the athletes that I've worked with that recovered from injury has had some phenomenal performances are the ones that saw it as a teacher and
Yep,
one that saw it as something like, what do I need to learn now so later on I can perform better? So this never becomes a hindrance again.
yep,
And I've seen that in collegiate athletes and age grouper athletes. And I love working with athletes with injury that are ready to like really take a different look at why it happened and not just like heal
yeah,
physically so I can get back out there.
yeah.
Like,
I
okay,
love that.
then, we'll see what we can do. But mentally, if you're still making the same decisions about your body, nutrition wise, training wise, and managing the same stressors, probably nothing's going to change. And your body's going to tell you again, this is not good for you. Right.
Yeah, yeah,
So that's where I love the message of loving your body, listening to your body, because it will tell you what you need. And
yeah.
it's
It does.
okay to trust your body, right? Instead of punishing it. So that's the body relationship. It's not just some nice little tagline. It's really when my body isn't doing something that I want it to do, how do I talk to it? Are you punishing? Are you angry at your body? Are you saying, it's okay, we'll get through this. It sucks, but I'm going
Yeah,
to take care of you because it's the only house we have to live in. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I think that can be hard
So
for
that
athletes.
was a long one with injury, but
No,
I'm pretty passionate about it.
yeah. No, it was great. I think that the important thing is that we need to be gentle with ourselves. We can be very tough on ourselves, and that's
Yeah.
fine, but there are moments where our body is a bit more fragile, and we need to be gentle with our decisions. It doesn't mean that you have to skip a workout,
Mhm.
but maybe you're running and you need to include some more walk breaks, or you just have to shorten the
Yeah.
intensity, or instead of
Yes.
strength training, you just do mobility or yoga for the day. So it's just being gentle, to
Yeah.
respect the body. And the body does know it. If it tells you it's hungry, it
Yes.
it knows that it needs food. It's
Yeah.
it's very incredible when you learn to
Yeah.
become more intuitive with your
Mhm.
body. Now, moving on, exercise addiction. I think the same can be for it's very easy to get addicted to exercise because of how it makes you feel. And when we think about athletes training and racing on a very high level, behavior verging on obsession is sometimes necessary. You're not going to find an Olympic athlete that doesn't say, no, I'm not obsessed, right? They own
Right.
that
Right.
they do whatever it takes to get to that level. But an obsession, consequently, can then spill over into compulsion and rigidity, kind of serving as a means to an end. Now, it could come from distorted body image, it can come from, you know, other ways to try to manage or to cope. But it can often be
Mhm.
a means of managing weight or a sense of control. And this is not just for athletes. This can be fitness enthusiasts that just enjoy exercising, going to the gym. That there's a lot of things that athletes do that fitness enthusiasts do as well. So we want to think of exercise something rewarding and pleasurable and enjoyable, and that it doesn't create negative consequences to life. And so we don't want that to and then it can become compulsive and obsessive. So what are your thoughts on an exercise
Mhm.
addiction? Because I think it can be hard for athletes to even admit that they're addicted to exercise.
Yeah, I think that's, again, going back to my initial point, if you don't wanna admit it, there's probably something going on, right? And I think people say it in jest, like, "Oh, I'm so addicted," and it's like, "Well, is there some truth to that?" Right? Um, so I think it's a big red flag. Addiction, again, if we're talking about the typical age group or fitness enthusiasts, that really needs to look at because it's, you know, one, we see in medical science, people that have true addiction brains are built differently. And so, there is a neurological component to it but that's where your self-awareness comes in. I think most adult people will know if they have an addictive type of personality, right? And this is non-clinical, this is non-diagnostic. It's just kind of like, yeah, once I tend to do something, I'm like, right, the endorphins, right? Because there are those people that skydive, that certain things just trigger the endorphins, and that's addicting, and the dopamine, right? So there's something very neurological going on. But then if we talk about lifestyle indicators, the exercise addiction is most likely um, one way that someone's avoiding other areas in their life. So
Mhm,
my guess is that other areas in the life are being impacted, and exercise, especially in our culture, is an easy way, an acceptable way. Hey, I'm going for a ride for 4 hours, right? While your family's at
mhm,
home and there's other things going on that you're avoiding doing or addressing, right? And so I think it could also be a way people avoid and addressing other areas in their life. Again, this is non clinical and non neurological because there's a lot of addiction research out there too, that I'm not familiar with and not going to get into at this moment. But I think, too much, some compulsion, some obsession that's telling you that something's unhealthy, and then you keep doing it. Ultimately, all the chips are going to fall,
mhm.
right? The
Yeah.
relationships, other areas in your life will be impacted. So I think, again, sharing, checking in with someone like, hey, I think this is going too far. I think I'm like like bordering on addiction, or my family, people will let you know in their life. Either they'll pull away and won't want to spend time with you, or they'll continue to nag you. Hey, where are you at? Hey, what's going on? Hey, did you forget about this? Hey, why don't you attend this? Right. So
Mhm.
there are other indicators in our life that tell us
Yeah.
if we're falling into an addiction.
Yeah. So many good points there. So the next, I'm going to kind of lump the next few topics together,
Yeah.
because I think they all kind of go together. And pressure to perform, fear of failure, high expectations, unrealistic standards, all in mindset, black or white mentality. Again, these things can make
Yeah.
athletes great,
Yeah.
but they can also be very self sabotaging when it comes to mental health. And I think we can all agree that we're our
Yeah.
own worst critics, that we know our shortcomings better than anyone else. And, you know, a,
Yeah.
a certain level of criticism is okay, because it's like, oh, I want to be better. Give me some, I want to do what's necessary so I can see
Yeah.
what I'm capable of, right? That's a wonderful thing to have. But it can also prevent you, if you're too self-critical, it can stop you from seeing your true abilities or what you're capable of right
Yeah.
now. And that can be detrimental to well-being. Or you may base your self-esteem on the way that you think others perceive you, or operate under the belief that you can never live up to certain standards, and then constantly shaming yourself
Mm-hmm.
because of that. um,
Yeah.
or feeling like self-worth is based on productivity or accomplishments. I can only feel good about myself
Yeah.
if I run this pace or complete this distance or achieve this goal. Not feeling good enough. So I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts, because I think that this is definitely something that we're all guilty of.
Yeah, and it's really well researched. I mean, these are thinking traps in disguise. So the catastrophizing, the black and white, all or nothing thinking, the mind reading that happens. These are some biggies, right? Where it can play out in sport, it can play out in other areas. But I really think that um, if you're if you're not an elite athlete where this is a part of your job, and you're feeling, the high expectation, the perfectionism, there's a big issue there, because it makes sense when I work with the elite athletes, because they have their whole team orchestrates around them, right? And so it makes a lot of sense that they have other people relying on them. They pay other people, so they need to make a wage. So there is these pressures, because this is their job. This is how they make money. This is how they sustain themselves, right? And so we look at the factors that impact that. But the typical regular age grouper, and I've heard this from, age group triathletes where, they want to impress their coach. They don't want to disappoint their coach. And these are 40, 50, 60-year-old people, right? And so it's recognizing, like, wow, like, I'm sure that mindset has helped you in other areas of your life, but now it's really getting impacting something negatively that you love to do, right? And your coach is here to help you,
Yeah.
and I think that that is really tracing back these thoughts, or challenging these thought patterns, right?
Mhm.
All or nothing is, and if nothing, then what? What's the worst thing that's going to happen? You don't do out the race. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? I'm going to feel embarrassed. What's the worst thing that's going to happen if you feel embarrassed? It'll pass. It's temporary, right? So so it's not bad to have these thinking patterns, because they're well researched. Most humans do them. It's, how do I challenge them and back them up, right? If I don't perform well, coach is going to be disappointed. Okay, I highly doubt that. But if coach is disappointed, then what? Well, I feel like I'm not worth it. If you feel like you're not worth coaching, then what? Well, I'm probably not good at the sport. If you're not good at the sport, then what? And usually everything is, once you say it out loud, it sounds like,
Yeah.
well, it does kind of sound silly, right? So
Yeah.
even verbalizing it helps you challenge, and the challenging makes you realize, yeah, that is kind of silly. Like, and I know, from experience, I mean, I totally trust you and Corral. If it was like, this is the plan, this is what you can do. And that's what I feel like in my mind. It helps me. I'm like, that's why you pay coaches. They do the work for you. And all you got to do is just black and white, those things there, and do them as best as you can.
Yeah.
Um, But it's really strange how you have coaches like you and Corral who are very understanding, have an understanding of mental health, nutrition, training, developmental levels, like competitive levels. Like you guys have so much expertise. And then there's still those athletes that struggle to trust. There's something going on there that you need to examine because they probably struggle and to trust other people. Right. So it's not just, I'm not, that's just an example of how someone can look at their patterns and say, why do I need to impress Marty and Corral so much? Hey, come to think about it, I really need to impress my boss and my friends. And right. So again, it's probably
Mhm.
playing out in other areas. But I also think this is part of triathlon that you probably recognize very early in the sport too, because going way, way, way back, I mean, this the culture and like the bikes and like you're new to it and you're like, oh my gosh, they ran this and they finished this and they went to that championship and this championship. Like you want to do well and there's a capability there. I think that's the unique thing about triathlon. You can go from an age group, no one ever know you knew your name, and then you have your day and you're like, whoa,
Yeah.
everybody sees your name on the podium, blah blah blah, right?
Yeah.
And so I think those part of the culture perpetuates that, especially when we talk about, this is not along the same things, but it kind of is with the comparison, right? I mean, it's a sport where you're wearing spandex and close to nothing depending on where you're at. And so you see a lot of these aesthetically pleasing people and you think that that's what you need to do to look like a triathlete or to be a triathlete, right? And that comparison really starts to take over what you really and what you enjoyed about the sport. But that's again where we have to set some boundaries with ourselves,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So when you started talking about like mindset and people criticism, I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, consider the source, consider the source, consider the source. Like I will take nutrition and coaching advice from you, but I won't take it from this random person I've never met in real life from Instagram and then give them my money, right?
Yeah.
We need to always stop to consider the source. I wouldn't, sorry, I'm not going to take financial advice from someone that has debt problems or has poor money management issues, right? But we
Mhm.
do that all the time when it comes to our self-worth. We
Yeah.
don't consider the source. If someone's judging me, but it's like most of the time they're judging themselves that harshly and they have self-esteem, they have other issues going on, not to judge them back, but it's like, let me consider and where this feedback, what filter it's coming through. And if
Yeah.
we do that, I think we can save ourselves a lot of like self-worth and esteem issues because we get to decide who we give our power to, right? And ultimately the power is always ours if we become aware of who we're letting determine our self-worth. I know you and Corella coaches will never say you need to look a little different or you need to lose weight. It's always going to be based on performance and how to help you feel better, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's still a long time coming in the culture because you're seeing as age group or non-collegiate coaches, you see athletes that come out of college and decide to want to get into triathlon and sport,
Mhm.
right? Or that are recovering from the eating issues and the body image issues that have happened because of sport. I know refer a lot of folks to you. So I think with all of this, I think having consistent coaches that are sending really good messages can be a very powerful thing, right? So again,
Yeah.
in your social media feed, who you're choosing to follow and what you're choosing to follow. I think it's
Mhm.
okay. People have said like, "Hey, I don't know about that quote you posted." And I said, "If it's not for you today, that's all good."
Mhm.
It doesn't then, I don't feel bad for unfollowing people unfollowing me and that's okay because it's not for everybody. That's not where everyone's at. And so I think learning to be okay with that,
Yeah.
you
I
know,
think it's really
because
important.
when it comes to disordered eating and body image, real quick, we can always find a group that's going to normalize that,
Mhm.
right? You can find a group on Facebook or in this world that will normalize like weight like wrestling, high so much disordered eating in male populations with that sport, but it's normalized, right? So you can find
Yeah.
groups that will normalize unhealthy behaviors, and we have to be very careful of who choose to be around.
Yeah. And I think it's really important that athletes work on
Anyway,
these these coping strategies now and not wait till event
yeah,
day. Because if you have a fear of failure and a perfectionist mindset
yeah,
or an all or nothing, then come race day, that is going to drive
yeah,
your performance. And if you're having an off
yeah,
moment, you're going
yep,
to give up. If your things aren't going as planned, you're not going to have the skills to be able to troubleshoot the situation. So it's things that you need to work on now. And it's not just going to
Yes.
relate to race day, it's going to relate to your overall life as well.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
the last topic I want to talk about is one that both you and I are extremely passionate about, and we'll try not to spend 5 hours talking about this, although maybe we should, um, is the idea of body image dissatisfaction, which often leads to dieting, which leads to disordered eating, which leads to eating disorders, and the misbelief that leaner is faster. So
Yeah.
I'll start off here and just say that
Right.
as an athlete, for everybody that's listening, you experience the same cultural and social pressures to conform to a perceived idealized image as the non athletic population. You're sold the same diet
Yeah.
plans that are
Yeah.
marketed to the medically ill or to the sedentary population. In a society that has such an overwhelming obsession with body image, it's not uncommon for athletes to manipulate the diet or become addicted to exercise in order to achieve a different look. For males, it's typically a more defined or muscular look. For women, it's usually a leaner or skinnier or lower body fat percentage. And then there's this idea that a body that weighs less will lead to improved fitness and race day success. Now, whether it's for aesthetics or competitive leanness or body dissatisfaction or pursuit of this race weight, often what starts out as an innocent
Hmm.
attempt to lose a little body fat or to get healthy can easily spiral out of control, which can then undermine health and training recovery performance and well-being. Now, we have talked about this before that coaches see the ability to change body composition and they tie it to that of one that is of necessity or one that shows hard work and discipline and commitment to sport. And so it's not uncommon, for we see it in eating disorders when people are told that they look better when or you look great and they've just lost weight, that feeds into them. Well, I didn't look good before and I look good now. Well, maybe I could look a little bit better and I'll be liked even more. And so it's not uncommon for coaches and onlookers to kind of applaud athletes that can reduce body fat to very low levels and often kind of
Yeah.
applauding disordered eating habits as well. How many times have we heard a commentator or a coach or even an athlete say, "Wow, that athlete looks race ready," or "Boy, that athlete looks really lean." Commenting on body size and shape and fitness. How many times do you go to
Right.
a race and size up your competition? Oh my gosh, that person looks so fast. Look how strong their legs are. Look how you can see all their abs, right? They must be so fast. So, body dissatisfaction is normalized just like disordered eating is normalized. So it's not
Yeah.
uncommon to
Yeah.
hear that a lot of athletes really struggle with body image, which then leads to disordered eating.
Yeah. Spot on and all of that. Yeah. It's if you saw, did you see the Netflix documentary, Social Dilemma?
Yes.
Powerful. And regardless of what people believe about, social media, the thing that stood out most is the body image issues that are being triggered and being reported by younger and younger girls because of the images that they're being exposed to, right? And so this is something culture that's changing and that we're up against. And I think that is the biggest concern I have right now because young people don't have many resources or they may not have the power to access resources and their only resource is the phone
Mhm.
scrolling, right? And these apps that help you change and manipulate parts of your face and your body, right? I'm on Zoom all the time and there's even this Zoom like touch up my appearance. I'm like, why the heck? You know? And I'm like, oh, okay, I get it. It kind of fuzzes stuff out, but like, what? Where we're not even, we even have options to not even portray how we look in a real honest and authentic way. And I think that's why conversations again like this are so important, because we're honest, we're being authentic about it. We don't have all the answers, but we have seen this enough, and we've been in the sport and seen the culture and social media change, and how the sport has been impacted by social media and access to things. And I think about you, Jill, talking about all of the friends and
Mhm.
detoxes and sugar clean. I know, it's it's so baffling, but I think it's symptomatic of people that are always looking for something new. We call it in psychology like doctor shopping, right? But there's coach shopping, there's diet shopping. That doesn't work. I'm going to try someone different. That doesn't work. Or they pushed me too hard. I'm not comfortable with that. I just want someone else that's going to tell me what I want to hear, or give me a quick fix to something, right? So I think we need to keep having these conversations, because you're absolutely right. That's what we're up against.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, it
yeah,
shouldn't come as a big surprise that social media and this kind of internalization of this thin ideal, or for athletes, it can be the lean ideal. It really strongly affects body image. And, the more you engage in appearance focused content, the more likely you are to compare yourself to the ideal body you see on
right.
social media. I actually, after the Black Lives Movement kind of started, it really opened my eyes to social media and who I'm following. And unconsciously, I didn't realize that my network of followers, or people I follow, it wasn't very diverse. And I consider myself a very
Hmm.
open
Yeah,
person, for all human beings. I love them all.
yeah,
But I wasn't following people who really look different than me. I was following a lot of people that
yeah,
look just like
yeah,
me.
yeah,
And so I started finding people that looked very different than me in terms of skin color and shape and size, and people with
yeah,
different disabilities. And I was like, wow, there's so many amazing different human beings out there, each sending a different message. And I was
yeah,
also respectful of people that if they were triggering to me, I wasn't going to follow
yeah,
them. I was like, oh, I really like their message. So my social media, it changed so much. So now when I see social media, I might see somebody that weighs 100 pounds more than me. I might see somebody that has facial issues. I'm
right,
following somebody that has lives life with tube feeding. I follow somebody that has
right,
a leg amputated, whatever it may be. It's just a lot of different bodies. And what
right.
I love is that each of these are promoting how they live in a healthy way. But unfortunately, a lot of athletes just follow very unrealistic representations of what bodies they think the body should look like, and they don't accurately show the
Hmm.
range of bodies that are really out there, especially for athletes. And self objectification, it feeds this destructive cycle of measuring your self-worth
Hmm.
against an appearance, and that leads
Yeah.
to higher rates of anxiety and depression and eating disorders and even suicide. When you associate, what's really interesting is that you can you can associate a body image like, wow, that person looks so happy, they're so confident, oh, they're so popular, look how many follows they have. And that can make you feel like you're not good enough. And so when you're bombarded by all these images, you start to look for ways, how can I change the way that I look, because
Yeah.
I'm not attractive, I want to have that idealized body. But what's interesting is it's not the body that you want to achieve, it's what you imagine a specific body type will give you in return. And think
And
that's
to,
what
and to kind
really.
of expand on that, it's how you imagine you're going to, yeah, it's how you imagine you're going to feel, right?
Yeah,
So you think feeling good about yourself is striving to look like that, and that will make you feel happy with yourself.
yeah,
Right. So I think it's no different than saying, oh, when I get that job or that car, I'll feel happy. No, you won't. You're just going
mm,
to get another carrots. The carrots is still going to be out there. It's just going to change.
yep,
But I want to go back to something you said about your social media feed, because I think that there's really important components there that people can learn from is one, taking a good, honest look at yourself, right? Um, and again, when we talk about body image, we're primarily talking from, a Eurocentric ideal, right? So when we have women of color, people of color, and their body images, and I see this in gymnastics. Black athletes have different pressures and have different thoughts and get different messages about their body versus the white athletes. And
Hmm.
so um, I think it becomes a very complex issue, and one we need to be mindful of when we're working with people of color that are struggling with body image issues, because there is a different history that comes with that. And so I think when, you said you took a good look at your feed and then you sought out different people to help expand your awareness.
Hmm.
I think that in itself is what people can take away. Be willing to
Hmm.
be honest with yourself and take a good look at what messages and who are they coming from? And is that coming
Hmm.
from a very biased Eurocentric view? And am I willing to put myself out there and get information and learn about other people and other life paths and their cultural impacts and what they struggle with and their stories and their journeys, right?
Yeah.
Um, that takes getting out of your comfort zone a whole lot. And I think
Yeah.
that's one thing sport teaches us, is that to do better, to want to get better, we got to get out of our comfort zone. And as human beings as well, you know,
Yeah.
I really, and I think for being mindful of when we post pictures or when we promote certain things, are we promoting them from a Eurocentric, uh, predominantly white lens?
Right.
And again, we're not going to go so deep into it, but body image is strongly attached to that, right? Especially myself. I mean, I'm a Latino woman, and I can even just trace back my own history and even see things my mom did that modeled to me that I had no idea that came from her striving to meet some type of image,
Yeah.
predominantly based off of the magazines, right? Glamour magazine, Vogue magazine, and all the cover women were typically white, tall, thin, blonde hair, straight, light skinned. And so this is the type of thing, conscious or unconscious, that impacts us. And so this is where, I really want people to think, like, even though you're not consciously attending to messages, your subconscious mind takes it all in.
Absolutely.
you know that's milliseconds. If you look on subconscious marketing, is that it still gets into us, so we need to be even more diligent.
Yeah. 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 We could definitely talk about this for a really long time. I guess I'll just
I know,
leave it
hour, yeah.
at maybe we should just do a whole conversation about body image, or maybe a series of it. I really enjoy talking about it because I think it's something that we all have to work on constantly because
Yeah.
of the bombardment of advertisements, and especially if you're in a
Yep.
sport that does have
Absolutely.
very revealing or tight fitting clothing. I mean, I grew up as a swimmer, so I was very comfortable with my body from a very young age being in a swimsuit. But then as I got older, your thoughts about yourself change. So it's something you have to
Yep.
work on.
Yep.
So your body image is not just how you see your body; it's how you think and feel about your body, and how you treat your body, and how you think other people think
Right.
about your body as well. And so, if your body image is negative, then you may feel uncomfortable or ashamed or self conscious. Those are not very nice
Mm-hmm.
things to feel about yourself. And as a result, you may then look for an outlet. You restrict food, you overexercise, you
Yep.
sacrifice sleep, you socially isolate, all because of the dissatisfaction that you,
Yeah.
no one put it on you, that you, unless you were bullied, and then, that's something to work on as well. But then
Right. Yep.
you that dissatisfaction that you have towards yourself. But in contrast, if you have a positive body image, which is hard in the society because of diet culture, but when you have a positive image, you accept yourself as you are, flaws and all, or I guess unique special traits that you have, and you hold great appreciation and
Yeah.
respect. And when you respect your body, you want to take care of it. You don't want to punish
Yep.
it or starve it or beat it up.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
not liking your body is a self-acceptance in you. It comes down to the
Yep.
inability to accept yourself as you are. Um, and in this instance, your weight, your
And I think that's a
size,
lifelong
your shape.
journey. Yeah,
Yeah.
right,
Yeah,
right.
it's not overnight, it's something, but I think it's worth getting on that road to take that journey, because
Yes,
when you if
yes,
you're
yes,
constantly channeling insecurities and body dissatisfaction through dieting, that's gonna fail you, or over exercising. But if you can, a safer and a more long lasting approach is to learn how to develop a healthier relationship with your body, because that building a positive body image can then help counteract a lot of that negative stream of images that you're
yes.
constantly encouraged to compare yourself to.
Yeah, and to add to that, I think it's really powerful to develop these tools no matter where you're at in life, because I could see how the self-esteem or the esteem I had about myself before I had my son, and how that changed. So I had a body image as a normal athlete, or as I felt like, was a healthy athlete, then a body image as a pregnant woman, then a body image as a postpartum mom. And now, I'm still postpartum, I guess, but 3 years out, it's changed. And through each one of those phases of changes, I've had to use my tools. I've had to go back, and it's tough because you talk to women that on postpartum or that went through the pregnancy journey, that's a whole other issue of body image triggers and expectations, right? So it doesn't stop, especially for women identified in this culture. It doesn't, the messages don't stop no matter what phase of life you're at. And I think for
Mhm.
athletes, I do want to add that it can get tricky because we have this athlete body image. So, who we are, how our body should look in sport. Then we have this ideal, how we feel like we should look. And then there's just body image that other people perceive. Oh, you look fine. What are you talking about? And then you get like, I hear this again from a lot of gymnasts. Like people are like, oh, you're fine. What's wrong? You don't need to lose weight. You're so muscular, and then that triggers too, right? So they're you're up against that changing how you think you should look, how your sport thinks you look, and then how society views you, right, as a non coming from non-athlete people. And so it's definitely worth like building these tools, building the awareness, because when you're aware, then you have the power to change, then you can start that journey.
Yeah,
But if you're not aware of it, then you can't start that journey. And I think that's the powerful thing about you offering this course for anybody to build awareness. And if you think you know everything, take it. And then to see, like, I'm sure someone's going to get something out of it. And so I think there's always a value of getting more information, more better educating yourself, especially if they're tools for self-love and self-acceptance, because it's going to change, right? We're all,
yeah.
like you said, we're all going to inevitably have an injury at some point. So, coping through that. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you mentioning the course. So it's the whole athlete course, and it's a 6 week or 6 series course that athletes can help kind of understand how the diet culture and disordered eating and exercise obsession and the idea of race weight, how it all impacts how pretty much
Mhm.
how we live, eat, train, think, and then steps to
Yeah.
improve our relationship
Yep.
with our body and food. So thank you for mentioning that. And, if for those who
Hmm.
are listening to the talk, if you're like, oh my gosh, I have such mental health issues after listening to that, that's okay. You're normal. We all have them. We
It's
all
okay.
struggle. There is
Yes.
nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that. The 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 bigger issue is if you don't address them. And so that's why I really wanted to
Yeah.
to talk about this today, is to normalize the thoughts and the feelings and some of our behaviors that we have, and maybe why are we doing what we do, but how can we make ourselves better so that we can cope better with stressors, we can live a more meaningful life, we can take better care of our body.
Yeah.
So that's was why
Yeah.
I wanted you to speak today, and I can't thank you enough for
Thank
spending so
you.
much of your time, educating us all with your
You're
practical tips.
welcome. Yeah. Well, thank you for inviting me. This conversation is so important. I'm glad we continue to revisit it. And we revisit it in the context of what's happening in our world right now, right? And we have to keep addressing it because it's going to keep changing. So I appreciate you really doing the good work and offering that out to everyone. So
Oh,
Thank you,
thanks.
Marnie.
All right, everybody. Well, Gloria and I are going to stay on here and chat for probably the rest of the afternoon. But for everybody else, you guys have a great rest of your day. Stay well, stay healthy. And if you have any follow-up questions, just let us know. And like I always say, don't forget to thank your body and make sure you take care of your mental health.
And you're amazing. Thank you, everybody.